Chapter 2. In an unusually hot September afternoon, the 25th Bill remembered, he had slipped out the side door of R.G. Wilson Incorporated in Brampton. The company produced computer software for the popular video gambling slot machines that revenue-starved governments had allowed in all variety stores and universities. Casinos had sprung up everywhere. The moral implications never concerned Bill Shadley, although his neighbor, Warren Dunn, had pointed out the folly of a government raising revenue from gambling, instead of real economic activity. Bill gladly headed home on that stifling Tuesday afternoon. It did not surprise him that he remembered that day so clearly, even the day of the week. Many now saw September 25th as the last day of the old way. They counted the next day, over 2.5 hard years ago, as day one, after the last day. Bill had a good view of the 407 toll road but seldom noticed the traffic's drone drifting across the open field. Toll roads now seemed remote, even the existence of a busy highway faded into memory. He considered using highways as part of his entitlement as a college graduate and management candidate. It started out as a typical ride home. "It's sure a warm day," Jack Sloan eased along the passenger side of the truck. "September was my favorite month." Bill opened the driver's door and automatically unlocked the opposite one. His shiny red pickup truck, nicely sized for comfort, reflected his high-income status. "Now it's October, this hot, stinky summer won't end, global warming at work." "You believe that crap?" Jack snapped his seatbelt closed. "Nope, but they brainwashed my kids at school." Bill turned the ignition switch and immediately put the AC on full blast. Bill believed climate change was real and humans caused it, but to say so to Jack would lead to a long, useless rant, turning the hour-long ride into a tedious ordeal. Sloan did not want to hear facts. The stereo sparked to life. Bill usually listened to the all-music radio, but on the drive to and from home, he wanted traffic reports and compromised with the light rock station. A song finished, and an excited DJ broke in. "There's panic on Bay Street. The market closed early, way down, and investors have panicked." "Holy crap," Sloan exclaimed. The truck jerked to a stop halfway onto the side street. "What does this mean for our pensions?" Bill looked at Jack, an accountant who knew the financial stuff. "If Wilson stock dropped, we took a big hit." Sloan looked serious. "Maybe putting our pensions into company stock wasn't a good idea." "It's in a trust fund, isn't it?" Bill tried to remember details on the paper he had casually signed at the company meeting. "Yes, it's a self-directed money purchase plan." Jack extracted papers from his briefcase. Phone in hand, he surveyed the internet. "Wilson's stock has gone over the cliff. Tomorrow, I'll put what's left into GICs until this blows over." Bill tried to remember other options. He had not realized the real implications of the news. Tomorrow, in the traditional sense, would never come. "Just leave them in stock until the value recovers," Sloan muttered. "I don't plan to do anything. We don't want to panic." He seemed satisfied by the figures on his pension report. Sloan had been concerned about the stock market for the past month and converted his holdings into the cash equivalent of GICs. Bob Wilson had agreed with him and sold off as much of his company stock holdings the law would allow. They had not shared their misgivings with their employees. Bill decided to go ahead with his plan. He had less faith in a recovery than his coworker. Honking brought Bill back to reality. He launched the pickup into the street and drove faster than he should have towards the 410. The radio reverted to its standard of old pop tunes. "Can't we get any actual news?" Jack felt a growing unease. Bill tuned in the CBC, cursing as he searched for the unfamiliar setting. The announcer finished a smug rant. This crisis did not affect her as she only used public transit and rode a bike. The host gave way to the traffic reporter. Big Jim skimmed over a few fender benders and then launched into a detailed list of gasoline stations selling the cheapest gas, highlighted by a breathless reporter at a gas station tearfully reporting the $2.05 price per liter of regular gasoline. This report seemed useful. Bill would soon realize that none of them had understood the calamity. Reports of stations out of fuel, fistfights, and a shooting at a gas bar in Toronto would not start until the evening. The wisecracking media in the USA talked about murders per gallon. The traffic report gave the radio producers time to line up an expert, a professor at the Rottweiler School of Business. The man launched into a monotone lecture, detailing the events that had led to the crisis. "Hey, I met that guy. Jack was excited he knew a celebrity. I took a course with him." The guest said the economy had stalled some years earlier, with high unemployment and futile government stimulus. Several events had combined to cause this disaster. The Asian stock markets had gone into a panic when China raised interest rates to crush rampant speculation and stock market swindles. Over the summer, China had made enormous investments in Russian energy, selling their hoard of U.S. bonds to raise the cash. A dissident Chinese blogger claimed China quietly sold U.S. dollars for months and received as little as 50 cents on the dollar. The American dollar had gradually strengthened over the previous year and spiked higher in the morning as investors rushed to safety. Once the blogger's claims circulated, the greenback value plunged and still fell when markets closed. Yeah, scared people bought U.S. dollars and treasuries. Sloan talked over the expert, but others got into the market. Bill sighed and strained to listen to the radio as he maneuvered through heavy traffic. The Rottweiler man went on. Drought in the U.S. Central Plains has made wheat and corn futures skyrocket. Fear has captured the Chicago Commodity Exchange. Will that affect food prices? The announcer asked. It may raise flour prices and sweeteners. Your burger bun could become more expensive than the meat, the expert laughed, but it will soon hit the livestock industry hard. Feed corn and barley will be expensive and rationed. In the short term, meat prices might fall as ranchers sell off herds they can't feed. Great, said the announcer, my steak is $30 a kilo. Not so fast, Rottweiler chuckled. Once the herds decline, meat will be in short supply and prices will skyrocket. Your bun will then be worth less than the burger once again, except the whole thing will cost a lot more. Will we be able to afford food? The CBC interviewer sounded alarmed. Will there be any food? Bill could not see the Rottweiler's shrug of uncertainty and would have to wait for the next newscast to discover the full scope of the day's events. In the early hours of the morning, Middle East time, Israel had bombed Iranian nuclear facilities, including the partly completed Awaz nuclear generating plant. The radio had referred to that on the way to work. It did not seem too important. Iran counterattacked by bombarding Saudi oil facilities and sank a couple of tankers to block the entrance to the Persian Gulf, sparking the spike in oil prices. Iran had not attacked American ships or bases, and it had not attacked Israel, other than the downing of several airplanes in the initial attack. They paraded a captured Israeli pilot through the streets of Tehran. There was no current fighting. Iran played the victim. These political events had caused the chaos in world markets. The European markets had fallen apart, and when the North American exchanges opened, they quickly reached limit down. By noon, 2 Texas refineries had announced they would shut down in 6 weeks due to lack of affordable crude. The price of gasoline soared. Bids on benchmark Saudi heavy crude hit $180. It was only a year since Mexico announced it was no longer exporting crude oil because of rising domestic demand and falling production. Worldwide commodity prices doubled in response to the collapse of the American dollar. Australia imposed an additional tax on coal and iron ore exports. China, Australia's biggest customer, had made their displeasure known, and had sent a delegation to Canberra to negotiate. Later in the morning, the merger of the 2 largest telecom providers collapsed. No one underwrote the $50 billion of joint debt. A rumor circulated that both companies would declare bankruptcy, looking for a government handout. The host turned the commentary over to a bank expert. It's only a minor correction. The USA released crude oil from its strategic reserve and calling on OPEC to increase shipments. Bill thought the designated expert ignored the fact that this would be impossible with the Persian Gulf closed to shipments from key Saudi terminals. The European Union has made hundreds of millions of euros available to the banks and cutting interest rates, the banker continued. The USA followed suit. He seemed enthusiastic about this, while not bothering to mention that interest rates in the USA and Canada had been effectively zero for years. I must admit that bond interest rates are rising in a worrying way, but all will be well, the banker parroted other commentators. We have a liquidity crisis, and when we fix that, everything will be normal. Much later they realized they faced a solvency crisis. Most governments were bankrupt. Several European and South American countries had announced total default on their national debts. More nations would follow over the coming weeks. Unable to find more experts, reporters interviewed other reporters in a wave of uninformed speculation. Quietly, the U.S. Navy website announced the Mediterranean-based Sixth Fleet had steamed towards the Suez Canal to guarantee Israeli oil supplies in anticipation of an Iranian counterattack. The Fifth Fleet, with its 3 carrier groups and 6 marine expeditionary units, guarded the Indian Ocean. The tanker sinking trapped 2 of the carriers inside the Persian Gulf, with the third outside the straits near southern Iran. Iran not attacking directly confused the Americans and delayed response. Last, the carrier group centered on the USS Ronald Reagan received 12-hour notice to sail from Norfolk for the southern Caribbean Sea off Venezuela. The media noticed the military implications later in the day. Public interest built slowly, with only the cable news networks and alt-news radio giving full-time coverage. Initially, only the financial community, politicians, and that unique daytime audience of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation paid much attention. The commercial media, especially television, had not interrupted their regular schedule. Police had caught singer Lulu Berry driving drunk again, and the media focused on that. "Damn it," Bill exclaimed to Sloane, as if global weirding wasn't enough, "look at that lineup." Jack twisted to look out the passenger window, as the pickup sailed past a filling station. "They're out to the street waiting for gas." "What was the price?" Bill braked to avoid a driver changing lanes without signaling. "Couldn't tell, they blanked out the price sign." "I'll stop for gas at the first one with no lineup." Bill sailed onto the 410 and gunned the truck to highway speed. Vehicles jammed every station along the way. A car making a U-turn into the Petro-Canada cut Bill off. In desperation, he would wait in a line for half an hour on Highway 10 to fill his tank, unaware of the trouble this full tank of gas would cause. As he blasted past the slower idiots in their little cars, he still felt a sense of power and control even though panic nibbled at him. He was not a stupid man, but he had paid little attention to events outside his daily life. "I'll see you tomorrow." Sloane slid out of the truck onto the driveway of his Orangeville home. "Can we go in earlier?" Jack leaned on the doorframe. "Wilson will want extra help first thing." "I'll be here at 7. Bill headed towards Weyburn. The posse reached the Town Line Road and faced a 20-minute walk to the old highway. The sun felt warm. It would have been a snap in his pickup truck. Ah, the pickup truck, Bill remembered. He last saw the vehicle as it swerved around the end of his street onto Highway 10 with Bill running in pursuit down the middle of the road. Sharon enjoyed telling the story of his housecoat flapping in the wind. Someone stole the truck the spring after the economic crash. Losing the vehicle had not been the worst trouble the thing had caused him. In hindsight, he realized how self-centered he had been. Back then, the truck was his pride and joy. Bill had felt smug rolling home with a full tank of gas. The small group, now well down the gravel concession road, sweated in the warm sun. They chatted about getting onto the land and the chances of buying diesel for the tractors. Bob's project for this year was to plant a bean crop and converting a tractor to run on pure vegetable oil. If it worked out, they would allow him to grow fuel for the farm equipment. Not that diesel or gasoline was unavailable. The Smiths sold it but charged a lot. Where they got the fuel was a mystery, but no one dared ask. None of the old filling stations had survived that first year. A good-natured argument developed when George claimed they could do more with horses, insisting hay and oats were cheaper to grow. "Did you notice that decent maple bush?" Matt inquired. "I'll put it on the committee's list for a sugar camp." The group groaned. The project list already overflowed with critical needs. They did not have enough labor to do everything. Maple sugar was a cheap substitute for cane sugar, both were a luxury. There was no longer a tourist market to subsidize production. "You can take that effing list and shove it up your arse." Bill smiled at George's outburst. The man was religious, part of a growing trend, with a complicated system of deciding on acceptable curse words. Everyone laughed, and that helped ease the sorrow and fatigue of their sad task. Bill remembered the night of the last day. He and Sharon sat glued to the television, every channel covered the crisis. They munched a dinner of frozen pizza and pop. The kids thought it was great and did not understand why their parents were so upset. Pizza and pop were a foreign concept in the third year of the crisis. "Bill, we need a plan." Sharon had recovered from the shock. "I'll go online and put my pension into something guaranteed." Bill kept his earlier priorities. "Better do that now." Sharon headed to the door. "I think the banks aren't stable." "I'll take cash out and grab some things at the Foodland." Sharon would do many similar insightful things in response to the crisis. Bill climbed the stairs to the second-floor office, and he was worried. The worry soon turned into fear. He logged into his retirement account. Faithful Financial had frozen all transactions. Bill could check his holdings, but not make changes. They dated the balances the 24th. Business and news sites gave a rehash of the television news. Deflated, Bill retreated to the living room. "Honey, I'm home." Sharon struggled through the doorway, her hands full of bags, chuckling at her reference to an old movie. She returned with a few weeks' worth of staples and $500 cash. "There's more in the van. Can you get Jeff to grab it?" The American president held Bill's attention. "Jeff! Jeff! Jeff!" Sharon always had to shout. "Yeah, Mom. Please get the bags from the van." "Okay, Mom, soon as I'm done this." Jeff never lost focus on the electronic game he played. "What's the news?" Sharon slumped into a soft chair. "I couldn't do anything with the RSP. There's a short-term screw-up. The Yank president is talking the usual bull crap, but he confirmed the military stuff. He says American forces won't attack except to defend themselves, but if Iran attacks Israel, it will be the same as attacking the USA. Nothing to worry about, he says their navy is ready. Jeff, please get the stuff in." Sharon's mind functioned on many levels. "Okay, Mom," he was about to reach 30,000 on alien death. Raiders. Prime Minister Harridan is going to be on all channels. Oops, the Yanks have just declared a bank holiday until Monday. Jeff. Yeah. Now. Sharon's exasperation flared. Her conversations with the kids had been like this lately. Okay. Jeff's voice was a combination of frustration and defiance. The 15-year-old stomped out the front door and struggled back in with a half-dozen bags. "Any good stuff here, Mom?" Jeff rifled in the bags. "Milk, bread and eggs." Sharon exacted revenge. Mom, anything good?" "A crispy crunch, an arrow for brandy, pop in the fridge, enjoy." Providing the goodies irritated Sharon. Although she thought all effort deserved a reward, Sharon had not yet convinced the kids, or Bill, the reward for helping should simply be dinner. "Harridan has declared the same bank holiday for Canada," Bill exclaimed. "No surprise there, he always mimics Washington." The phone rang out an old Sly and the Family Stone tune and displayed Bill's office number. "Hi, Bill, Bob Wilson here." The familiar voice sounded somehow strange. Bill frowned. Wilson never called employees at home. Bill, we have a minor problem. I'm asking everyone to take tomorrow off. What's up? Bill tried to sound nonchalant. The bank called. Bob's voice had a catch in it. They froze all lines of credit until they clarify things. We can't process the payroll. I'm only bringing in accounting to work on the problem, push receivables, etc., and I can't fairly let others come in. I'll call when we clear things up. They tell me a day or two. We have solid cash receivables, so there won't be a problem. Enjoy the day. Bye. Who was that? Sharon saw Bill's concern. Wilson, I have tomorrow off. He sounded depressed. They froze his credit line, and he can't run payroll until it's fixed. He says it'll be a day or two. Good grief. We only have a few hundred in the checking account. Sharon had thought of taking it all out. She wished she had. It will only be a day or two. We'll all get a bonus after this, knowing Wilson. Bill tried to sound upbeat, but Wilson's voice made him uneasy. Fear stirred. Sharon went to put the groceries away. Bill could not absorb any more bad news and killed the TV. Hello, Jack, Bill called Sloan. Wilson called and told me to stay home. Yes, the line of credit, have a good day. Get it sorted out soon, hotshot. Bill smiled at the phone. Let me know what's going on when you get back. The line went dead. Jack had not sounded happy. Bill grabbed a beer and went out to the deck into a clear, mild night. He slumped into a plastic recliner. The dew was heavy, soaking through his pants, but he barely noticed. A deep swallow of cold beer reassured. Bill leant back, looking at the brighter stars struggling through the town's glow. He closed his eyes, resting his mind, remembering those nights long ago at camp, lying on the dock, under a carpet of stars, having no worries. Bill stumbled on a rock the frost had forced to the surface of the road, returning him to reality. No one had graded the gravel roads in 3 years. He looked around from his position near the front of the line, noticing the Smith boys chatting quietly together. Deep in the back of his mind, warning signals clanged. He did not like the Smith family. Everything they did drew suspicion. The violence a few minutes ago strengthened that feeling. The Smiths were an old local family of contractors with a company started by the brother's grandfather, now run by Roger Smith. They came as close to elite as you could get locally, along with old farming families, who mainly produce milk and potatoes. The disaster had not hurt the Smiths. The family company worked for the rich folks in the hills east of town. Some of those had collapsed in bankruptcy and left the county, but many wealthy people had fled the city to live in their country homes. Considering the urban chaos, this was not a surprise. Smith built gates, fences, low towers, berms and bunkhouses for the rich. Bill had not seen it for himself, but Smith's local laborers gossiped in Maud's cafe. Some of these new buildings Smith had constructed housed fit-looking, uniformed young men, occasionally seen in town. The wealthy folks brought supplies up from the city. There had been some conflict with Smith when he tried to bully the council into things only for his benefit. People resented his lack of concern for the residents. Smith had supporters since he employed many locals and paid wages in Canadian dollars instead of the local barter script. Despite shortages and inflation, dollars could buy things not produced locally. The Smith brothers were not among Stevie's original selection of deputies. Roger had demanded Stevie bring his sons. Bill wondered why. Bill finished his beer and followed Sharon to bed. He slept well, only to be jolted awake by the angry buzzing of his alarm. His interrupted dream seemed about gassing up the pickup. He leapt out of bed and headed for the shower before he remembered he did not need to go to work. Cursing silently, he smiled at how habits dictated life. Bill had set the alarm automatically. He stayed up, still worried over last night's shocks. The morning news had nothing encouraging. An American flotilla had left Norfolk, its purpose and destination unknown. Reports came in that most NATO naval units prepared to put to sea along with news of other military activity. Gloom hung over the world and the early morning. Business news had an air of panic. With all banks and markets closed, there was little actual information to report. Coffee in hand, still in his housecoat, Bill wandered out to the back deck. It promised to be another glorious day. Sitting on the damp lounge chair, feeling the cool morning air around his legs, he almost felt content and planned how he would spend his free day. Cold weather would arrive soon, he needed to ready the yard. There saw little to do but put the badminton net away, mulch shrubs, and maybe cut grass. It would be a relaxing day. The patio door opened. What a gorgeous day. Sharon smiled over her steaming mug, looking delightful in her pink housecoat and sleep-tousled hair. I have a bit to do in the yard before winter. I'll get on that today, now I have time. Bill drew another lounge chair close and Sharon eased into it. They said nothing more for a few minutes. Finally, she broke the silence. I didn't sleep well, worrying about how we'll meet our payments. How will we pay for food? It spooked you. It won't come to that. There's too much at stake. The government and the banks will fix it. Bill's words were braver than his feelings, but he believed things would recover quickly. He had to think that. They had too much at stake. Wilson told him yesterday he had approved Bill's promotion to management. Spooked or not, this crisis has been building for a long time. Warren Dunn warned everyone about this. That nut? Bill's disdain for Dunn surfaced. Warren Dunn, a retiree, had talked for years about the end of life, as we know it. Bill considered Dunn a crackpot, however, he was a decent gardener, friendly, well-spoken and shared an excellent fruit wine. He owned the property that backed onto theirs. Bill and Warren often talked over the fence. Bill did not buy into the message of doom in some videos Dunn had shown. He tuned out when Warren started talking details about oil, gas and resource stuff, and the pyramid scheme of the world financial system. Bill laughingly called him Warren Doom when gossiping with neighbors. After all, Bill thought, some well-paid economists and politicos knew what they were doing. They would never let things collapse. Bill's training had instilled a deep-seated belief in technical solutions to every problem. Sharon ignored this implied criticism of her intelligence. Bill could condescend, but he would listen and think about things, even if he questioned her arguments. Warren described yesterday almost exactly. She sipped her coffee, staring at the back fence thinking, as she often did, that one could never know exactly what was just on the other side. Sharon was a bookkeeper with a bit of a poet in her. She took satisfaction in knowing she had passed this trait on to her daughter, Brandy. Humph. Bill knew Sharon thought about global finances a lot. Perhaps she did because she made the household work, taking care of all the details. Working from home had made that possible. What's bothering me is what Warren said about what will happen now. Like what? Bill never paid much attention when Dunn discussed life after a collapse. The banks will close, as they already have. Then, they will reopen with withdrawal limits and suspended online banking, demanding payment of credit card debt and cancel lines of credit. Eventually, they will demand we pay our mortgages in full. Can they do that? Yup, read our mortgage. They can demand payment in full of the outstanding amount. These mortgages are all recourse loans, so we can't default without them hounding us forever. They made that law about 3 federal budgets ago. She took another sip. The law lets them control how much of our savings we can withdraw. Why would they do that? Bill sounded exasperated. His tone revealed the anger he felt for never paying attention to these things. He stared into his empty mug. It's because they are broke. Banks loaned out many times their deposits. Even then, they don't have enough cash to cover deposits or pay off their own bonds and loans, especially if their loan customers default. She quoted Warren, but as a bookkeeper, she understood finance. The banks are broke and hoarding cash. That's why I grabbed the cash last night. I sure hope not. Bill sensed Sharon's fear and wanted to be the protecting man. It's worse, she sounded resigned. The banks froze your company's line of credit. I bet they've cut off all lines of credit, including the town's bank credit. No organization can function without a line of credit to meet payroll and other immediate expenses. Today, the school will be normal, and the town office will open, but what happens when the banks reopen, and people don't get paid? There'll be a lot of unhappy campers, Bill shuddered. I think it's coming. Sharon looked at Bill and reached for his hand. We have to be prepared for hard times. Bill pulled her over to lie on top of him and kissed her deeply, hugging her tightly. They could work together. I love you, bookkeeper. They kissed again.